Hey, what's up, Street Talks? It's Eric Kim from the Eric Kim Street Photography blog. So, just wanted to do a quick video in terms of getting some practical tips and tricks in terms of how to stay inspired in your photography. Personally, I know one of the most difficult things it is in photography is to keep your passion alive. There are days where dealing with our crazy commutes, dealing with crappy things at work, the stress of family, money, life, and so forth. And in the midst of all this craziness, how do you stay inspired in your photography? Well, these are based on my personal experiences because even though I'm a quote unquote full-time photographer, I have a really difficult time staying inspired in my photography. And currently, I'm living in Garden Grove in Orange County, California. It's probably the most suburban place ever. There's actually literally no sidewalks, so you could understand my dismay as a street photographer, going from shooting all the time in downtown LA, other urban areas when I'm traveling, and being in a boring suburban place where there's actually not that much to photograph. And based on my personal frustrations, I realized that it wasn't the fault of where I was living or my external circumstances. The only fault that I had was my own attitude and the way I saw the world. Because one thing I genuinely do believe in photography is that there's always interesting things to photograph as long as you look closely enough. One other thing I want to mention is know that as a photographer, you don't always need to be taking photos every single day and of everything. I think at the end of the day, the point is to enjoy your life and to live a rich, fulfilling life from which you do work which is personally meaningful, not to be the world's greatest photographer. And sometimes we get confused because we think the point of life is to become the world's greatest photographer. No, the point of photography is to enhance our personal lives and for us to live a happy and enjoyable life. So these are just 7 quick tips in terms of how you can stay inspired in your photography based on my personal experiences. And of course, mileage will vary. So number 1, shoot in quote unquote boring places. It's kind of insane to think that photo opportunities lie everywhere you are. This is one photo that I shot. I actually shot this on a smartphone. I was testing out some LG smartphone camera, and I was in an In-N-Out Burger. It's for those of you guys who don't know, it's California's kind of like our favorite place to get hamburgers. It's super cheap, fast, and everything's fresh. And even if you look in the background, you could actually see a photograph of Cindy. Anyways, I'm inside In-N-Out Burger just waiting to get my food. And I see this kid with his hat and is gesturing to his mom. And to me, this was like such a sign of Americana and what it means to be part of like American culture. And so I just snapped a bunch of photos and ended up really enjoying this photograph. Little did I know that I could make this interesting photo in a freaking In-N-Out out of all places. For you non-Americans or non-Californians out there, it's equivalent of taking quote-unquote street photography inside a McDonald's. So regardless of how boring your life is, there's so many photo opportunities anywhere you go. It could be inside a Costco, it could be inside a grocery store, inside a fast food court, at your job, on the way to work, during your lunch break, after work. There's so many opportunities to shoot. And nowadays, especially with smartphones, I think we really have no excuse for not being able to make good photographs. And once again, this is a photo that I just shot on smartphone and it looks fantastic. So channel your energies into being able to see interesting things in boring places. Good examples of photographers to study is William Eggleston, who spent his entire life in Jacksonville, and it's apparently a really boring place. Made amazing photographs. Same thing with Martin Parr. And I think it's all about making beautiful photos out of ordinary places and moments rather than ordinary photos of beautiful places, like what happens to many of us when we travel to Tokyo, the Middle East, or other places in the world for the first time. All right, tip number 2, enter places you're afraid of. I feel that one of the most important things in street photography and photography is to just follow your intuition and your gut. Sometimes, have you ever walked down the street and you see bars, clubs, interesting places that you want to enter, but you feel a little bit awkward because you don't really know the place or you don't know how you're going to be responded to? In those situations, follow your nose and go to places you're afraid of. So I was at Cindy's family's restaurant, Long High Restaurant in Tustin, California, for those of you guys interested. And next to it, it's like this kind of shady dive bar. And I was interested in it because, there's kind of like an Americana sign outside. And, I was kind of curious to enter, but it was around 1 o'clock and I didn't want to drink a beer at that time. But regardless, I go inside and I find all this commotion inside and all the bartenders and bathing suits, and it was just kind of a crazy place. But I'm really glad that I entered because I ended up eventually talking to one of these bartenders who had these fantastic tattoos, and understandably, I was very nervous to take a photo of her, but I complimented her on her tattoos, and I just did a little small talk, and I said something along the lines of, "Oh, excuse me, miss, I think your tattoos are badass. Do you mind if I made a photo of you and your tattoos?" And what I tried to do was not put the emphasis on her, but her tattoos. So I think that made her a little bit less self-conscious, and she was totally cool with it. And she asked me, "What you want me to do?" And I said, "I don't know, just point to your tattoo and flexed her bicep," and she just kind of laughed and said, "Oh, I don't have any muscles," but she did anyways. And I actually made two images, one of her looking into the lens, one of her looking at her muscles and pointing to her bicep. And I think the one where she's not looking directly into the camera is much more interested. So anyways, when you're traveling or if you're at home, enter places you're afraid of, places you might not gone. I think the best photographers are the ones who are able to make interesting photos in their own hometown rather than always having to travel to exotic places to make interesting photographs. Tip number 3, make social commentary. And a lot of these kind of lump together. For about 2 years, I actually lived with Cindy in East Lansing, Michigan. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. The only reason the town is really alive is because it's the home of Michigan State University. So for the first 2 years of Cindy's PhD program, she was there. And once again, there's not that many people walking the street, so it's really hard for me to shoot street photography. But what I did instead was I'd walk everywhere with a point and shoot film camera. I think this was the Ricoh GR1 camera at the time. And one place we'd often visit was Meijer, which is this kind of convenience grocery store. And on my way out, after buying some groceries, I saw this online employment application out of order, and I was like, wow, this is fantastic. This makes such a strong social commentary about the times. And this was around maybe 2012, 2013, when the economy still wasn't very good, especially in Michigan. So I think even though it didn't have any people in it, and it's technically a boring photo, I think it makes a strong social commentary about unemployment, underemployment in America. And I think these kind of photos, you don't need any fancy cameras, equipment, or gear. It could have been shot on a smartphone or anything else. But I think it's all about having the eye for it. So essentially when you're out shooting, just kind of know that social commentary is everywhere. Number 4, remember you don't need people. I think if you're watching this video, you're probably more interested in street photography, but this applies to all photographers. Just realize you don't need people to make interesting photographs. And when I was living in Michigan, doing road trips around the Midwest, and was in my car most of the time and didn't really walk around too much, I focused on shooting urban landscapes. And sometimes I feel that if you could capture a good urban landscape with strong emotion, you don't need people at all. This was a photograph I shot. I think I was driving through, I think this was Pittsburgh. And lots of urban decay and this juxtaposition between the new and the old. Here it's kind of a graveyard for soda machines. And I was driving along this, I saw it, I pulled my car over, and I snapped a few photos on, I shot this on film, Kodak Portra 400, and I just kind of love the sign of the times and the old building in the background. And even though it doesn't have any people in it, I think it has a strong sense of nostalgia and romanticism for the past, but also kind of this decay and this sadness from, the past versus the present. Another tip is to look for beauty in the mundane. So thinking of mundane as the ordinary. So look for beauty in the ordinary things. I was in Prague and I was out shooting with some of my students. And from the corner of my eye, I see this curtain just kind of blowing in the wind. And I just really love the motion, the movement. And it just looked very poetic. And oftentimes, you don't need anything super crazy like a double rainbow in the background or a guy in a pink afro walking around. It was just a little white curtain blowing in the wind. I made a few photos and I just kind of love the simple elegance of this image. Tip number 6. So many of us commute to work. Some of us commute for hours at a time in a day. And I'm totally guilty of this too, is when I'm taking public transportation or in my car. And I'm always so distracted by my smartphone. I'm either reading a book, reading articles, listening to podcasts, listening to music, and so forth. Sometimes we forget that some of the best photo opportunities are during our commute. So for those of you guys who take the bus or subway to work, that is one of the best places to shoot because most people are kind of absorbed in their worlds and you're also surrounded by people. And this is more pertinent, especially if you're interested in photographing people. And so if you're driving in a car, of course, this is a lot more dangerous, but I know a lot of photographers do this with care. Will actually take photos outside their windows while they're stuck in traffic. And there's also been some photographers who have actually rigged their cameras to tripods and attached them to a car and photographed other commuters. So just kind of know that no matter how kind of crappy or shitty our situation is in terms of our commute, our work life, any other obligations we may have, there's always photo opportunities. And whenever we have these restrictions, we just need to force ourselves to be creative. And the last tip is just shoot from your heart. It's really short and apt advice. I think this is also good advice for myself is know at the end of the day, the emotion, the heart, the soul you put into your images is the thing that matters the most. And know that you don't need a million fantastic photos before you die. Even having one meaningful photo before you die is worth it. This is actually one of my personal favorites. If I die and I'm only known for one image and it's this image, I kind of feel happy that I've done my job as a photographer. For this photograph, I was in New York City and walking down the street, see this amazing lady down Fifth Avenue, and I approached her and I said, "Oh, excuse me, miss, you look so beautiful. Do you mind if I made a few portraits of you?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." And I ended up taking a ton of photos, and I was just kind of talking to her, engaging with her, and I was just taking a bunch of photographs. And somewhere in the middle, she looked at me and said, "You're so crazy, ha 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 ha." And then I made this photograph. And so if you actually look at my contact sheet, you can see how many photos that I shot before I was able to elicit this reaction. But one thing I love about this photo is, had I not interacted with her, had I not talked to her, have I not complimented her, I don't think I would have provoked this sort of response from her. And afterwards, she told me she was like in her mid-70s, and I was like, wow, if she's in her mid-70s looking this good, having such a good time, you know, I should be the same when I'm in her situation. And what I love about the photo is, I think it puts a huge it puts a huge smile on my face and hopefully a smile on the face of the viewer. So just know that as long as you shoot from the heart, as long as it's genuine, as long as it's personally meaningful, I think it'll resonate with your audience as well. So those are 7 quick tips in terms of how to stay inspired in your street photography / photography or whatever creative pursuit you like to do. Just know that at the end of the day, of course, there's days you're not going to feel inspired or passionate to make images. So don't really force yourself to have to take photos every single day if you don't want to. But if you're frustrated that you're not able to go to downtown, to the downtown area and shoot street photography all the time, know that photo opportunities are all around you all the time. And it's all about our attitude, not our places, not the place where you live, because I even have friends in New York, Tokyo, London who are all jaded and they're like, this place is so boring. The grass is always greener on the other side, as they say, or better yet, the grass is always greener on your side. So stay positive, count your blessings, make the best of where you live and make photos that are personally meaningful. All right, until then, until next time, hit the streets, be happy, and spread the love. Peace out, guys.